All right, so we'll get started. This webinar, I think it could be, in my opinion, if you want to be very successful in the long-term practice of law, is going to be probably the most important webinar, maybe, a presentation that you ever see. And I'm telling you this because I've been in the legal profession for over 25 years. And this is honestly the single most important thing for attorneys to be successful if they want to be employed, if they want to make a lot of money, or if they want to have like major impact in the legal profession. This is by far the most important thing. Last night, I was reading this article that just came out about Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the country, and how she rose and got that position and what happened. And she graduated from Stetson Law School. I don't think she did particularly well there, and then started off working in the government as a prosecutor for a long time. And basically, through all of her networking skills and everything that she was able to do, is in the position she is today. And most people, and that's an attorney that came out, didn't go to a particularly good law school, didn't do anything that well there, but managed to network themselves into the most important position, probably for one of the most for an attorney in the country, all because of their ability to network and the things that she did and lots of things. So that's one thing that's important. And then there was another thing that I thought was very interesting. My best friend is a from a large law firm, was a partner at a major law firm, and he actually retired very young when he was about 45 because he made enough money to live very well. He lives in a like $20 million house and that he owns and did very well when he was very young, all because of networking and how he was able to do that. He wasn't the best attorney or anything, but he became extremely successful at a very young age and working in major law firms, making a great deal of money. And he was talking to another guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, but a partner at a major U.S. law firm that has, and it would blow your mind. He's got over $185 million worth of business, which it's hard to believe, but that's how much business he has. So my friend went to see him and talked to him about maybe coming back to work in the law firm as a practicing attorney. And this attorney with $185 million in business said, what you can do that would make you don't have any business right now, but what would make you actually much more valuable would be if you would go out and try to introduce me to different people and get me different meetings. And he said, okay. And so over the past month or so, he's introduced him to people that are in head of the sovereign wealth funds and major in Singapore, major people with huge access to huge amounts of money in business. And this partner with $185 million in business said, if you introduce me to five people, then the odds are that one of those people will need me over the next year or will have a case or something that they can bring in. So I thought that was very interesting that this guy is doing that. And then my friend, even after having retired from practicing law, because of all these networks and things, has been referring cases that things come to him, and one of them is about ready to settle. And the fee he's going to get from that, I think, is a percentage of it is going to be something like north of $10 million. So this networking stuff is huge, and it's what makes the most successful attorneys in the legal profession. They all do it. It's a priority for them. This person with $185 million in business obviously has other people doing work for him, but at the same time, his value, he believes, is just networking and bringing in all this work. And he does it, and he's always been doing it, and he networks, and that's the priority. And also my friend who networks, he still literally brings in cases that have significance, and he networks everywhere he goes. He networks when he's surfing. He networks when he's at the gym. He networks with people that he's known in the past. And these networks are just huge. This guy literally makes more money just sitting around with networks and talking to people and meeting random people than most attorneys make practicing law. 95% of attorneys make practicing law. So networking is important. I can also tell you that every significant attorney that has done well in large major law firms networks. It's just there's nothing They all do. It's a priority for all of them. They're trying to meet everyone that they can. And the more people do it, the more successful they become. But all of the most successful attorneys, I can tell you this from being a recruiter for 25 plus years, that when I encounter any attorney that's making more than a couple $1 million or even more than $1 million most of the time, that they are very into networking, and that's what's most important to them. It almost is more important than actually practicing law, if you can believe it, because once the cases or the matters come in, that then other people are helping with the work and all sorts of things. So it's extremely important. I'm going to talk to you today about how to do it, and I'm going to talk to you about people that do it successfully and what they do. I'm going to teach you why it's important for your job search and why people that are very good at networking never are unemployed. I'm going to talk to you about how they get jobs. I'm going to talk to you about how people just may not be the people that are going to help you. The people that are helping you are people probably that they know. And I'm going to teach you everything that I've learned in my career about why this is the most important thing. It's actually, believe it or not, and I'll just come out and say this, it's more important than your skills as an attorney. Because if you look at Pam Bondi, or you look at whoever, you look at the most successful attorneys, they are often exceptional attorneys that are good at networking. But if you can network, you're always going to be employable. You're always going to have a job. You're always going to make a lot of money. Or if you don't want to be in a position where you're making a lot of money, you can be in the sort of positions that you want. Every successful politician, every successful attorney, this is their priority is networking. And so I'm going to tell you all about what I know about that today. Also, at the end of this is a live webinar, so I will be taking questions. We did a resume workshop last week, and it went very long, and I didn't have the time to get the questions, but I will do all the questions today. Any questions you have about this or anything about your career, I'm happy to answer anything you can think of when we're done. Okay, like I said, the most successful attorneys are always network. Attorneys that don't network are in trouble. And if you do not network and you do not learn how to network, at some point in your career, you're going to get in trouble regardless of your legal skills, because you are going to need people to give you work. And people aren't always going to have work to give you. Sometimes they will, but usually that they don't. So if you don't network and you're not able to develop networks, then you're going to have problems with employment, getting employed. You're going to have problems with staying employed with different places. You're going to have problems with unemployment often. You're going to have problems with not making enough money. There's all sorts of issues that you're going to have if you're not able to network. And so this is honestly, it's the most important thing that you need to understand, that you will never reach your full potential in the practice of law if you do not network and you don't learn how to do it. It's just how it is. I talk to people every day that haven't networked, and they are in trouble. People will often not interview them. They don't have business. Nothing is happening the way they want it to. And so the idea that you can just do good work and succeed is actually not true. And so what does networking mean? It means that there's a large circle of people, hopefully, that help them access information about all sorts of things they wouldn't necessarily have access to. And they're able to make themselves known to people whom otherwise would not know who they are. And a lot of networking is just being seen. So most of the time, the people that are networked just aren't seen. And that means if someone has a case or someone has a legal matter, they don't see them. So people network in all sorts of different ways. Personal injury attorneys network on buses, people on the side of buses, attorneys that are seen in different places, they get on boards and they're seen. And when those people have cases on boards or matters, then they may refer them. So being seen is important. And if you're networked, you have information about jobs, developments in your law firm that you may help you or hurt you, different things happening in the legal market. You're getting your network, hopefully, with clients that can give you things, and much, much more. And so getting access to people that have those sources of information is incredibly important to your career. And what also is just as important is what people outside your circle of influence have. And this is just as important as what people inside your influence circle of influence know. So you may know, most people know at least 100 people. And the best way to develop business is to often write down those 100 people, stay in contact with them, and then they will see you and know you're around, and then will refer work to you. It's actually that simple. There was a very famous course that used to be taught about how attorneys could get business, and they told them that one thing. So you should write this down. I think I talk about it a little bit later in this webinar, but I'm going to talk all about networking in your legal career. First, I'm going to talk about how to network and finding a job inside of a law firm, but that applies to other organizations as well. Then I'm going to talk about the importance of networking to keeping your job inside a law firm. So you can't just go to a law firm and work there. You also need to be very aggressively networking inside the firm. Incredibly important to staying employed and for future opportunities. And then I'm going to discuss how, if you do not network effectively, how that can be fatal to your career, and you can experience all sorts of issues that are just beyond that are not good. And the number one source of failure for people is the not networking, and it's brutal. People, gosh, they make partner in law firms, but then they don't network enough to get business, and they lose their jobs, and it's horrible. And so many horrible things happen if you don't network. So this, like I said, is probably maybe one of the most important presentation you ever watch. And I hope you take notes, because at least related to your legal career, because this can help you a lot. The first thing is, if you want to find jobs, you want to move into better jobs, you want to whatever you want to do, get another job. Most people find out about jobs through other people. Most attorneys do not find jobs on job sites. Most attorneys do not find jobs through recruiters. So a substantial amount of them don't. So there was a graduate student, a Harvard graduate student, who did a study of how people find out about their jobs in the late 1960s, and they published a book about it in the mid 1990s. And after interviewing tons and tons of people, he asked them to identify the 5 people that they spent most of their time with, and then draw diagrams about how those people were connected to each other. And at the time, it was well known that people back then as well learned about jobs through, I'm sorry, other people rather than through advertising. And so he asked the people to identify the one person that had referred them to the last job. And what was interesting is the person that was identified was never one of their close friends. And the person that did refer them to a job was almost always an acquaintance and not a friend, meaning that your friend may know that you're looking for a job or need a job. And so they have a network of people. They may know more than 5 people. Most people know 100 people. And so they would refer the person to the job. So knowing someone, having that could refer you to the job. He interviewed 282 people and found that 56% of the people found their jobs through personal contacts. Only 17% learned about them from close friends. And so the lesson is just that people learn about jobs through people who are often outside their immediate networks, the people that they talk to, but those people know other people, and they are able to have access to information that you don't have. And so the people that are outside of your group are likely to be exposed to information that you're not exposed to, meaning everybody knows people. And so those people can often and will often take great pride in referring you to other people for jobs and so forth. And so if you want to learn about jobs, or you want to learn about getting business as well, it's important that you are part of networks where not just your close friends and the people you spend a lot of time with, but people that they know. And this same logic I found applies to attorneys. So why is networking important for getting new jobs? Because when someone recommends you, you are considered a much safer hire than someone who's just coming off the street. People are coming up, attorneys and people in general are suspicious of outsiders. And so if you have a contact, then that contact is someone that is vouching for you, which makes it much easier to get a position. I work with successful partners all the time, and these partners have huge books of business. And in most of the cases, like I will work with them and get them jobs and offers, but they will always have competing jobs that they get on their own because they have networks. And so it's just how it works. And so I think probably less than 5% of people that I know get jobs through people outside their immediate circle of influence. And I heard something very interesting when I was practicing law, and this is again another extremely successful attorney that I know, and he was talking to myself and a group of other associates, and he said that one of the biggest mistakes that he thought he made in his legal career was not making more friends and getting closer to people he went to Harvard Law School with. So he was 20 years out of law school at that point, I think. And those people that he'd gone to law school, a lot of them were general counsels and things. And he could have referred him business or referred him certain types of work that he only did. And I didn't understand what he was talking about at the time. And because of my eyes, I had a hard time believing anybody could be more successful. But he believed that he hadn't properly networked with a lot of people and that it hurt him later on. So in law school, he felt that he should have been better networked. And I even remember I went to University of Virginia, and the head of the corporate practice of one of the largest law firms in the world is someone that I went to school with, and he became head of the corporate practice when he was probably in his mid 40s and extremely successful. And he was the type of person that was very good at networking and just smiling. People liked him. He would show up at things, and that's why he became very successful. He was never the best student or anything, but he was able to effectively network in law school and probably after law school and just kept doing it. So regardless how well networked you may have been in law school and throughout your career, it's something that is incredibly important for your job search. And you have to network beyond your immediate ties and people that you know in order to be successful. And when you are, it's going to help you when you're seeking positions. And most law firms, it's very sad. What happens in most large law firms is the billable hours are emphasized, doing very good work. It's very stressful. And a lot of people feel that once they've joined a law firm like that, their number one task is only to do the best work possible and nothing more, and they're going to be successful. And this is actually not true. What the most successful attorneys will end up doing in those law firms are a couple things. So they will be taking time to put themselves in positions where they are networking outside of the law firm. And most of the people that go to those firms do not stay in them. They leave because they think that's all there is. And they may join another 1 or 2 or 3 years and then another 2 or 3 years later, but they're never successfully building networks. Now, they may be doing it very successfully within their firm, which is also important. And your whole career can change if you're very good at networking inside your law firm. I have a relative that was laid off from a major US law firm, a very prestigious one in Hong Kong, when there was a financial crisis in 2008. And he was able to there was a after he was laid off, he was very well networked and had people that had his back at the firm, and he was able to get a position working for a major insurance company and became their general counsel and made tens of millions of dollars and did very well, all because he networked very well within his existing firm. So networking is important in your firm, but it's also important to make sure you're networking outside your firm because in most large law firms and most law firms, associates are for the most part commodities. And unless they bring in enough business, they are expendable. Law firms will only make someone a partner when they have to, and they only really have to make you a partner if the value that you're giving the firm is way beyond what they're paying you. And in order to keep you and make a lot of money, they need to keep you around. So they will keep you around if you have a lot of business and enough, and they will advance you if you're doing that, or it looks like you do. But if you just go into a law firm and close the door and put on your blinders and work as hard as you can, you're making a mistake by not networking because every day that you're not networking is a day that you are not potentially having access to jobs, access to business, and all these things that you can build up over time. So you can certainly work as hard as you can and exclude all this stuff. And maybe you'll have long-term success, but in most cases you won't. I know one very, very successful attorney that probably has a $50 million book of business. And he went to a really good law school, went to University of Chicago Law School. And then after graduating, he, instead of taking a job at a major law firm in Los Angeles, he decided to go to a very good, well-respected middle market law firm, meaning it was difficult to get a job there. You had to go to good schools and do well and so forth, but they didn't serve the largest clients. They served middle market companies. And he believed that by going to that firm, he could network and get those sorts of clients in LA. This is what he did, was reach his conclusion as a law student. And so went and started he was a corporate attorney and did a certain type of, I think, M&A transaction or something. I don't know exactly what it was, but he got a couple of years experience doing that. And then he decided, okay, I'll bill 2,000 hours a year. And in addition to billing the 2,000 hours a year, I will spend 2,000 hours a year networking and meeting people and going around LA and talking to companies. And that's what he did. He got in touch with all these companies and he started going around LA and talking, which is a huge market, and talking and giving free advice to different companies about different matters that he understood. He trained to be a corporate attorney at that point. And so he gave advice, and then people didn't necessarily hire him, but later on they remembered him and he started bringing in business. And pretty soon, 10 or 12 years out, he's got tens of millions of dollars in business. And so that's how people do it. He literally, and then what was funny, when he was like a fifth or sixth year attorney, he decided he was going to hire a driver because there's all this traffic in LA, and was using the driver so he could work in the car while he was going to these different meetings and so forth. If you think that partners in law firms that are the most successful don't network very well, that's what they do to make them successful. Now, some of these partners just get lucky and they bring in one big client and then that becomes their career. I've seen that happen, but in most cases, they have a diversified list of people that are giving them work. And in almost all cases, the most successful partners are the ones that have networked and have business. They can certainly network within a firm and become very close to a partner with business, and that partner could literally give them business for the rest of their career. But in most cases, those people are able to bring outside things in. And so you obviously need to be very good at your job, but the work you're getting is coming from somewhere, and it's typically coming from partners who have made contacts outside of the law firm somewhere and are bringing in work. And those partners are the ones that the people without business have to look up to, have to respect, have to be brown nosing with to get work and so forth. And that's what you should aspire to do, not be someone that constantly needs to beg other people in your firm for work. And so these partners that bring in business and these attorneys, they do all sorts of things. They will be on boards that don't even seem relevant to practicing law. They will join organizations and things, and they will try to contribute and do nice things and help people. This is often how they get business. They are in the right place at the right time and they're seen. When I was practicing law, I was practicing, the last firm I worked in was a big New York law firm, and there was a partner there that had this huge case that was great, but it was just from some local community hospital whose board he sat on, and it became this massive matter that brought in just massive amounts of fees. And it's just, you would never have expected it came from something like that. That's how people bring in a business, and people get jobs through networking. So if you want to go in-house, there may be people that can help you with that. You will get often referrals of work. You'll get information about jobs and places that are hiring, and it's very helpful. And you're far more likely to get a position with people outside of your immediate group than lawyers that you may be close with. And if you know a few people and you stay close to them, you're likely to only benefit from the information they have. And you're always going to know, what that information is. But if you're numerous people outside, then you're going to be exposed to a lot more information. The number may be 10 or 20 times as much information. Now, what does that mean? What does networking and things outside of your your group mean. When I was practicing law, I was on this large case. It was an environmental case, and it was a class action. And there was a guy there that was an associate, and he would send articles, printed articles, mailing them to all of the other attorneys, which were over 50 law firms and attorneys on this class action, and about different topics and things related to this art law review articles, just different things. Then you put little notes on them, and ended up speaking to the guy years later, and he was another one of these people with probably the largest book of environmental business and in the, at least probably California, at least that I've seen, and was able to bring in all this work. So what does that mean? It just means that he was a very good networker. So he was contact with people that way and doing things. And if you are able to have people outside of your immediate sphere, you're going to be exposed to a lot of stuff. The most successful attorneys get work from places you would never imagine, from dry cleaners, from butchers, from just people in their health club. They're from going to foreign countries and surfing. I know one guy that developed a big book of business. I think it was over $5 million surfing in Costa Rica or something. Just he met a few people there that were part of a certain industry and they gave him work. And so by doing that sort of stuff, you're going to be exposed to a lot more information by meeting people. And most people, what they do that are successful networkers is they will join associations and different things relevant. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but different associations, different groups relevant to what they're doing, and they will meet people and they will stay in touch with them, even if just talking to them or going out for coffee every 6 months or a year, dinners, just messages, asking how things are going, all this different stuff. And when they do that, they have access to information. They don't even have to ask for business. They are just there. And then people think of them because very few people make an effort to connect with them. Think about who makes an effort to connect with you. It's not a lot of people. You would feel pretty good if people from your law school were constantly reaching out and making an effort to connect with you, and or if people that you worked with in the past, and without asking for anything in return. And that's what the people that do that are very good at networking do. The most successful attorneys, as I said, are most often the most networked. The people that are the ones that are open to speaking with me. So if I call someone on the phone about a job or something, and which I don't do a ton, but I will call partners and things. And when I call the ones that are the best networked and have the most business, they're actually the most open to speaking to me, which you wouldn't expect. You would expect that the person that has the most power in the industry and so forth and the most business would be the least likely to speak to me. But it's actually the opposite. It's the people with the most business and the most power that are most likely to speak with me. And then the people that have the least business or don't have any business or are having issues in their career are often the least likely to speak to me. And I was surprised when I first started recruiting successful partners a long time ago, how friendly they were, much friendlier than an associate if I called them. And back then I wondered why it was. And why was it? It's because anyway, let me just go back up a second here. There's a lot of effort lists that people like myself would use. You would use things like the top 40 lawyers under 40 in California, or America's top trial lawyers, lists like that. And when would call people from these lists, many times they had large books of business. They were almost always happy with where they were and not likely to move in the near future. But they were just very open to speaking with me. They were asked for information. They asked me to stay in touch. They wanted to know what I was seeing and so forth in the market. And they literally would look at someone like myself and they would say, this is a great opportunity to network with someone that probably has feelers out to a lot of different firms and understands things. And that to me, but at the time was amazing. And these attorneys would, back then, people would send you your card. They would remember me if I saw them. And there are a lot of reasons why I think this is true. And first, I think that the reason these attorneys are on list of top attorneys and all this sorts of stuff is because they're good at networking in the first place. They get nominated for the list. Lots of people know who they are to nominate them. and they were able to get attention of individuals that can get them recommended and attorneys at their firms and other firms and so forth. And it's typically people get on these lists by being nominated by different people or suggested. And so the people that get the most nominations will typically get on them, not all of them. And the ability of these people to get media acknowledgement and so forth is meaningful because there are attorneys that are much better attorneys often than these people that get on these lists of special attorneys, but they're not singled out because they don't have networks and no one knows who they are. And whenever I read these lists, I'm always intrigued because I know that attorneys are often on these lists that are not on these lists that are much better attorneys often. And the reason they're not on the list is just because one group of attorneys is networked and the other's not. If you're very well networked, you can often get on these lists. And if you're not, you don't. And the reason I think that these individuals will take my phone calls, they will call me back, they will make sure they talk to me. It's very interesting. They're just trying to expand their network. And most attorneys that I speak to are often not savvy and they won't want to network. And when you go back from the study, the reason I think that these attorneys will take calls is they value people beyond their spheres of influence. And it's the same thing about learning from jobs outside your sphere of influence. All of this stuff is very important. Okay, so how do you network into an attorney job and or a legal job? And there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and I've listed most of these, but I do know people that have networked and not found a job, and you may have tried to network and find a job and not been able to. And in most cases, I think the reason is very basic. People, their heart's not in it. They're not interested. They don't want to be practicing law anymore, and they have a lack of enthusiasm and engagement and interest. And if you reach that point in your career where you're just no longer, or your heart's no longer in it, then that's not a good sign. And people aren't going to refer you to something if you don't have a lot of enthusiasm and you're not very interested. People refer people that are excited. And that's just something to understand right at the outset that if you're not excited, then people are often, they're not going to have the level of enthusiasm to recommend you to something. So people recommend people that are interested in their practice area. People recommend people that really want to get into a good position, and people that you have to be recommendable. And so simply going to events and meeting people isn't going to help you if you don't want a position. You have to connect with people in a way where they see you as very enthusiastic about what you do. And if you really want something, then when you network, you're going to have a lot of enthusiasm and people are going to pick up on it. And this enthusiasm is going to be contagious. And few clients want to hire people that are very enthusiastic about whatever it is they do. And people want to recommend people that are enthusiastic. So how enthusiastic are you? And this is like one of the biggest, and this what I'm going to tell you right now is the difference between successful attorneys and unsuccessful attorneys. And it is a huge mistake. And I'm not trying to beat up on you, but you're probably doing what you may not because you watch these webinars and you're learning and becoming probably knowing 10 times more than your peers. It's amazing what you can learn just today. And learning this stuff, by the way, I've given similar presentations to this and then had people come back to me like years later in this particular topic. They've said things like, if I hadn't heard all this, I wouldn't have succeeded. But you need to like people like this is I want to explain something extremely important to you right now because if you get what I'm going to talk to you about, it's going to be very short what I'm going to say. It could change the direction of your life and your career forever. So there are two types of people. There are people that go to employers, and when they get to those employers, they show up as workers, like no different than someone potentially going to work in a factory. They think they have to give a certain number of hours, do quality work, and they're entitled to a certain amount of money. And if they don't get a certain amount of money, then they're going to leave, or they're entitled to this, or they're entitled to that. And the employer is an employer, and an enemy who could turn on you at any moment, and you're going to give the minimum of what you want from them, and you're going to be very suspicious of them if they do something wrong, and you're going to be take you know, to get on your heels. You're going to be against certain people if they don't behave the exact way you want them to. And so that's the way a worker approaches things. And so if you're a worker, then that's how you'll be treated. A worker just can anybody can hire a worker, and a worker does not have the same value as someone that approaches things like the way they would the way they would a client. So every employer is a client. And how do you approach a client? You approach a client by doing whatever you can to take care of them, by anticipating their needs, by being in partnership with them, by not criticizing them, by not looking for trouble, by doing what they ask of you, by trying to be on their side, to support their cause, to learn and to give more than is asked for you and provide more value than other people would in the market. So most people, they don't approach things that way. They think that the employer is just something that they have to be against and they or that is trying to take advantage of them. They need to be suspicious of them. Very few people treat the employer like a client. If you have a client, you're going to be solicitous of getting work for them. You're going to want to impress them. You're going to want to show them that you're the best and the most excited about doing work for them. But this is not how the majority of attorneys approach the work. The ones that do this get recommended because people see it. The ones that do this, people like them and advance them. The ones that do this are people that get business. This is exactly what they do. And they often have, most of the time, I'm just going to tell you another thing, just flat out, attorneys that are very successful are able to communicate, become experts often in something. There are some experts in their subject matter and they like it and they'll want to talk about it and write about it and whatever. And it's infectious. And so you have to, if you have that, that's going to go a long way. If you don't have it, people are not going to want to recommend you. Clients aren't going to want to hire you. So you need to have a belief in what you do and excitement about what you do. And you need to do that with people in your firm also, because if you leave, you're in another firm, they're not always going to be able to take on every case or every matter. They may recommend things to you, and that enthusiasm is infectious, and people want to recommend things to people that are excited. And I got business when I was practicing law, and when I left, I was a third year attorney or fourth year, whatever it was. And I was getting referrals. I would get referrals from people I went to high school with because they remembered how excited I would be about whatever I was doing and work and writing and things. And then I got referrals from people from college and then I got referrals from those referrals. And so by the time I was 3 or 4 years out, I had over $500,000 in business, which is a lot for a third or fourth year attorney. And it was coming to me because people remembered my enthusiasm. I even got I remember a trademark litigation case from a large law firm from someone in my previous firm that was an associate that got brought in the case and didn't think the firm would do it and gave it to me. It's like incredible. If you have enthusiasm for what you're doing, you treat everything you're getting like it's very important and you want to impress the client and so forth, and you don't approach things like a worker, then people are going to refer things to you if you're enthusiastic. And I would take things and act like it was the most important thing in the world. And it wasn't, of course, but having that level of enthusiasm helps you. When I quit my law firm, that last law firm, basically told everyone not that I was going to recruit, but that I was going to go set up my own practice. And I got referrals from right away. I had enough work to keep me busy from partners in my firm, like divorces and all these things that firm didn't do. And it's incredible what can happen if you do that. So when you network, everything counts, and you need to think of yourself not as an employee, but as a champion for your practice area, for what you do. Be enthusiastic. Everything that you do when you're networking counts. So the things you say to your friends, I don't like practicing law, that's going to get around. No one's ever going to refer things to you. I want to do something else. Everything you say counts. So if you say negative things about what you do, or your employer and so forth, then that's going to travel. There's lots of things. People will do things wrong as law students or attorneys, and they think it doesn't matter. It does matter. You have to develop a certain reputation. That reputation needs to be that you take whatever you're doing seriously. That reputation is often about helping others without expecting anything in return. So many of the most successful networkers and attorneys that I know out there, that they have gone and helped others, whether it's people, general counsels losing their jobs, whether whatever it is, they've helped others. They've volunteered. They've done stuff that seem meaningless. They've gone out of their way when people don't see to do things that people that would seem beneath them often. That I was telling you, I read an article last night. I think it's in the Atlantic about Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, and they were saying things like that she did, like she was working someone came in that was someone that was injured or something in a business, I don't remember, and asked her to make copies and thought she was a secretary, and she did it. She was asked to help volunteer with a current attorney general of Florida for some matter, and she did. And but then when she was there, he wanted her to put hand sanitizer on his hands, and after he shook hands with people at some state fair, and so she sat there and did that, and just things that people noticed that didn't where she was humble, and that meant something. And people that network will volunteer to different events that may seem meaningless, but everything counts. Helping people when no one's watching counts. I remember talking to a very successful attorney, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago, and he was telling me a lot of his business came from helping people just personally. He was saying people inside of companies losing their jobs and things that were attorneys, and then helping them find different companies to work in because he knew things. And then those people became powerful later and started referring business. I thought it was very interesting. He was just in a position where he networked and tried to help people without expecting anything in return, never asking for anything in return, but then things come to him. And what I say about everything counting is that most of what you have done is known and seen by someone. So if you become someone that's calculating with your time, that is trying to whatever with your firm or is not available and all these different things, it becomes known. And the good things you do are also known. The selfless things you do are known. Contributions you make are known. The people that you help are known. And when you become a topic of conversation, or if someone is interested in passing along your name to someone looking for an attorney, there's typically going to be a general opinion expressed of you, and the opinions can be very simple. You want the opinion to be positive, and you want people to think you're the sort of person to be recommended. And so you need to remember that everything you do in your firm, the way you treat people, the way you treat secretaries, the way you treat paralegals, the way you treat the word processing staff, the way you treat younger attorneys than you, the way you do everything, what you do outside of work, if you're drinking or whatever you're doing too much or using drugs or in tons of relationships and you talk about that at work, that you have to remember that everything counts. Everybody is always evaluating you based on what you do. So how do you want to look? If you're bragging a lot and making people feel badly about themselves, that's going to hurt. You need to be humble. And the other thing is that this is really the most important point of networking to that I can tell you. So if you have that level of enthusiasm, people see you as a force that's very good in the profession, someone is a very strong representative of your practice area. The most important thing is just to be known to a lot of people. And people that are known, that's really all there is to it. If a lot of people know who you are and they think highly of you, then when legal matters pop up, then they will contact you often. And that's how it works, just getting known. That's when I was talking about the attorney with a $185 million book of business. I'm serious, $185 million book of business, which obviously is more than some of the largest law firms in the country. This is one attorney. All he wants to do is meet powerful people, because if they know who he is, then they will refer things to him. And it's exactly what happens. It's how you do it. But the reason and so being seen is the most important thing. Just people knowing you. So I told you earlier about this thing about what you do is you write down 100 people and you write down 100 people's name that you know. You do everything you can to brainstorm about that, and then you try to make contact with those people regularly so they know who you are. And so if you know 100 people, those 100 people know 100 people, and that's 10,000 people that are out there potentially as referral sources. And those people that they know are actually more likely to give you business than those 100 people. But people hire advertising agencies, public relations firms, and the reason they do that is because they want to be known to large audience of people and to network and get the attention of people. That's why these public relations, advertising, and so forth exist. Recruiters like myself have the ability to make you known to large groups of people and get their attentions. Products usually cannot sell themselves unless they're known to large groups of people. So that's how products sell themselves. And it should, or people like it and it's referable. And so that's what happens. If people don't know who you are, how can you get a job? And certain types of people, when I'm an attorney, I mean, at recruiting, are much easier to place than others. And one of the reasons to use a recruiter is as many groups of attorneys are not well networked. You could be in a certain practice area in a certain city, and there could be thousands of law firms that do what you do. And so you need someone to help you. In large law firms, it's often very difficult for people to develop networks because there's so many people. But in smaller cities, recruiters are hardly ever used because everyone knows each other. So that's how people move in between firms. So there's networks usually that are very effective in smaller markets compared to larger markets. And then in large cities, there's even some networks that are people in certain practice groups as opposed to other practice groups. One example would be, for example, the bankruptcy attorneys in Silicon Valley. It was during the dot-com boom. It was very funny. Like it's not funny, but these attorneys were all freaking out there and in LA and different things because the dot-com boom, just if you're not aware of it, because you literally may not have been born during it. But the dot-com boom, there was all these internet companies that were being funded and so forth, and tons of work and very few bankruptcies and so forth. And so all these bankruptcy attorneys didn't have much to do, especially in the Silicon Valley. But these attorneys would all meet. All of them would meet in these different groups, and they would spend time doing that. And they would network, and there weren't a lot of them. And suddenly, in late 2000, all of these dot-com companies went bankrupt, and there was tons and tons of work just overnight. And then suddenly there was a need for all this. And so I was very excited seeing all this potential work, and I started approaching all of these bankruptcy attorneys. But what happened is that there was absolutely no need for recruiters or anybody because all these attorneys were very well networked as a group and knew each other. So anyone that wasn't happy with their job and wanted to move would very easily was interviewing at different firms because there were these great networks and things. And literally, I talked to 20 or 30 people as early in my career. I did a lot of calling, and everyone knew each other. Everyone was very well networked. So people that wanted to move could move. And the same thing was happening in Los Angeles. And so this was an example of a very good network and how that works. And so people that were part of, I was a HOPA, most bankruptcy attorneys were that, but it was very easy to network and for those people to get jobs because everyone kind of knew each other. And there are lots and lots of law firms in most decent sized cities. And there are social networks where there's for practice groups. And so if you can, it's a good idea to spend time trying to network with other attorneys. That will help you get jobs because when you need jobs, you will be able to often know people that know things and so forth. You can ask questions, and there are all sorts of organizations that people can get involved in. Now, ultimately, meeting potential clients or putting yourself in a position where you're meeting potential clients is very important. But I know attorneys that have very active practices where all there are is getting referrals from other attorneys. So getting involved in those sorts of groups. There's all sorts of different things. You can certainly get involved in the bar association, but there's places for different practice areas. There are public nonprofits. There are all these different sorts of things where you can get involved. Museums are good, like places where you can be exposed to people with money, like all these sorts of things. But and ultimately, if you get involved, and it doesn't really matter what it is, it could be yoga, it could be or exercise in the gym, it could be classes, it could be all these different things. You're eventually, if the more people that know you're a lawyer, a certain type of lawyer, the more likely you are to be able to network. I was years ago, I was taking all of these acting classes, and I got to the point where, anyway, I was liked it a lot, but I met all these people, and they just thought I was an attorney. They didn't know what I was. And for years, I've been getting emails and calls and things for people wanting me to help them with various legal matters. And only because they saw me that they thought I was an attorney, and maybe there were 30 people or maybe 50 people in these different things that I was exposed to. And they would refer people to me, and I just kept getting all these referrals, even though I hadn't practiced law at that point over 20 years. But anyway, there's so many things you can get referrals to, so many groups you can join, and there's plenty of places where you can do this. And these events are usually not where you're going to get, you may get some information about different your practice group and so forth, but really the most important thing is networking. And so if you go to meetings, you're really it's the most important thing you can do. You may think, oh, I'm going to lose 10 hours of billing or 6 hours or 8 hours of billing going to one of these things, but that those hours could result in 100 hours, 200 hours, or a client for the next 10 or 20 years. So it's very important to try to get involved in these things. It's all about networking, and watching other people is also important, learning about developments and getting access to that information. But anything you can network and know people is important, and staying in touch with them. And then if you have the opportunity to speak at different events, it's important and extremely important. So the more of these meetings you go to, the more people you're going to meet and the more familiar you're going to become with them. I had something very funny happen when I was in law school. My last semester, I took this class in franchising, and there was a symposium on franchise for franchisees that was put on by this attorney that was teaching the class. Was an adjunct professor, but he had his own practice and doing franchising law. And he'd moved from New York to Charlottesville for some reason to do this, to teach and to keep running his practice. But he invited, this was like a breakfast to lunch symposium. And I just remember this partner from Hunton and Williams getting up and talking for, I don't know, an hour and a half about some franchising developments. It was the driest, most boring possible presentation you can imagine. And there were all these people that had been invited to this that owned Subways and Burger Kings and different types of franchises in Charlottesville and the cities around it. And after this guy's presentation, which literally was about ready to fall asleep, it was awful. And all these people rushed up and talked to him, and he gave them his card. And I'm sure he got a ton of business from that day just by being seen and by giving a presentation to a bunch of franchisees. This is how a lot of trust in estates attorneys get business. They literally will go into a old folks home and give a presentation about why it's a good time to update your will or invite everyone to a steak dinner or something, and they'll have more than enough work just being seen. And then when you're seen, people will mention you to other people. They will mention your name to companies and things that may need work. You just need to be seen. And then having the opportunity to do people favors when you participate in groups, and that's going to increase your opportunities over time. So the more people that you network with, better off you'll be. If you stay in touch with people from law school, those people are going to get into positions where they can refer your work. And literally, it may be like the work you get referred can be just this ridiculous stuff. Like I had like this very funny case. It was that came to our law firm when I was in Los Angeles, and it was a case about this, I don't know, this penis enlargement surgery or something. It was just completely bizarre, and it was very funny. And it came, and but the company was being that hired our that was coming to our firm for help was being it was in everything was in Detroit, and I had clerked for a judge outside Detroit, and so I had contacts in Detroit, and it was a big case. It was they were alleging that this company had maimed all these men and stuff, and those people are all suing. And so I was in a Los Angeles law firm. They didn't have any contacts with any firm in Detroit. So I referred the matter to someone that I knew that I had worked with, and it became a very big case that I knew from Detroit, an attorney that I had networked there. So that is a effective, just being able to know different people and so forth. I had an opportunity to refer something just because it was out of state. So you can, if people in different states, they can refer work to you. I just immediately thought of this person when this case came in. And when you have, and the reason I was able to refer is because I was working with a partner who said, "Oh, I realize you work in Detroit. Do you know anybody that could take this case?" And that's what I did. You take interest in causes, you can write books and papers and things. That's going to increase your networking possibility. Everything you do is going to impact it. I hired an attorney once because they had written a short article that was like no more than 2 or 3 pages about a legal matter, and I was the only person I could find that had done anything about it. So everything you do involves interacting with other people and can increase your networking possibilities. Now, I'm not in any way trying to convince you to use BCG or anything like that with this particular thing, but I'm going to just show you what a recruiter can do and how different recruiters can make you aware of different jobs and employers. So if you're looking for a job, you may not have a large network. Most attorneys don't. And there are a few ways that recruiters, and you could do what a recruiter does on your own too. So I'm not saying that recruiters are the best, but recruiters do have the ability to do certain things you may not be doing on your own. But the best way to get a position, as I told you earlier, is actually not always to use a recruiter, but to use your network. And if you have a very good network, you will often be able to get jobs much more easily because you'll be referred by someone, and that referral goes a long way to making the firm trust you as opposed to someone that they may be meeting off the street. But recruiters can network very effectively with law firms and candidates, and that's what they're paid for. And a lot of them are very successful, a lot of them aren't, but the best recruiters are very good at getting people into positions that they wouldn't normally get. There are some recruiters that are not good, and the perception is all they're doing is making an introduction and collecting a large fee, but this often ignores the reality of what's going on because the reason that most recruiters and recruiting firms don't succeed in the legal profession is because, or at the level they're capable of, is because they're not effectively networking for people. And many legal recruiting firms really are not ignored because they don't they don't get effective, they're not effectively networking with their clients. So I'll tell you something that is very meaningful to me, and it's a story I heard several years ago. And there was an individual in Beverly Hills that I met through my then wife. I don't know him anymore, or I'm not married anymore, but anyway, I met him through her. And this person owned a pawn shop, and he'd come over to the United States from Israel previously, not too long ago, and owned this pawn shop in Beverly Hills. And the main business was essentially loaning money out to movie stars and extremely wealthy people when they had financial problems, cash flow. They didn't have cash for different things. And these are very wealthy people. And so they would bring in rare art, Ferraris, jewelries, and he would loan them money from often pennies on the dollar to have possession of these goods for a certain length of time. And in exchange for this, people were charged large interest. And then if they didn't return the money they were loaned with the interest in a short length of time, then he would take ownership of this. And he became incredibly successful, made millions of dollars doing this. He had a beautiful home on the beach in Malibu. He had collected all sorts of rare sports cars and had a very good lifestyle. And so I was curious, like, how does someone like start a pawn shop like this? And he actually then also ended up with his own TV show for a while about his pawn shop. But I was wondering, how does he become so successful in doing something like that? And I was wondering, is it just the business model? What was he doing? And I thought there must be something more to this. And so he had originally come over and he just had this kind of small pawn shop. He was not trading in expensive things. But he started immediately asking, like, who are the best public relations people in Los Angeles? Who's the person that can get me the most exposure and so forth? And I guess he asked around for a long time, and then he was repeatedly told the name of someone many over and over again. And so he wanted to talk to her and hire her. And he was rudely told by a receptionist that this person did not take on any new clients unless the public relations person became interested, approached them first. I don't even know what that means. Maybe was recommended to, I don't know. But he kept calling for weeks and months and was eventually put through to the person because he kept calling. She listened to how much he wanted a worker to work for him. And after a couple of minutes, she asked what he did. He told her what he did. And then she quickly got him off the phone, said she had no interest in doing working for a pawn shop. And then she also told the man that he couldn't afford her and he would need to pay a minimum retainer of $200,000 for her work. And so the next morning, he went to the public relations firm and told the receptionist that he wanted to see her in person. She made a telephone call and told her that the person was there. And the man, she said that the woman would see him. He said, I'll wait to see her anyway. And he did. And so he came into the office, this public relations office, every day for 2 weeks and literally didn't have his pawn shop open or had someone else work. I don't know. But then he sat in the lobby until the firm closed each night. In each night he was rebuffed. He just literally went into the office for 2 weeks and kept saying he would wait. And after 2 weeks, obviously everyone knew he was there. And the receptionist finally, someone called and said, she'll see you now. And so he met with the public relations woman, and literally, from the stories, he got on his knees and begged her. And he'd been in the Israeli forces or something, I don't remember, and finally she agreed to represent him. And within a few weeks, the public relations woman had gotten stories for him about his pawn shop, what he did, running on the cover of the Los Angeles Times as a human interest story. And then some other major magazines and so forth titled Pawnbroker to the Stars, which I don't even think he was at that point, but that's how she pitched him. And his business took off in a hurry. He obviously got a TV show that was very well known. And it quickly became one of the most important pawn shops in the country because he realized the importance of finding someone with a really strong network and that could do that. And so that's what a lot of legal recruiting firms are able to do is they are able to, or good legal recruiters, because there's bad legal recruiters and good legal recruiters in different firms, but are able to get people into uniquely placed in networks and so forth that can help them. And I love the legal recruiting profession, but literally, if you find someone that's very good at it, and there are good people, most of them aren't, 90% of people aren't at the level of the best 10%, but they can influence what happens in your career because they're well networked. They know people that they can put you into jobs. They know top firms, smaller firms, and they've been meeting people and networking their whole career, and that they can get people positions and they're well networked. And so certain law firms are likely to listen to them when the recruiter's serious, the way they might not listen to others. And they're a voice and they can get people in direct contact with the right people that normally wouldn't get seen. And no, and just as a public relations person had contacts at the LA Times and places like that got this pawn shop broker known. And there's just people that can do that. And you have to, if you're looking to get into different in your career, it's important to try to find people that can help you and good recruiters and talking to multiple recruiters and so forth. And there are people that are very good at it. And I've been involved with lots of people that before I talked to them didn't get a single interview. And once I was involved, they had job offers often very quickly with firms that may not have, that literally had ignored them when they had applied on their own, often very soon before that. I had an interesting thing. There was a law firm that was, I think it was Hogan Lovells, that opened in Los Angeles, right down the street from my office downtown. And I got to know the person that was in charge of recruiting in that office and had a nice relationship with her. And I remember I had a candidate that had applied there and like a month previously to me, and she'd ignored his application. And then I had sent him and she hired him, and I had a very good relationship with her. And she ended up hiring multiple people for that office, at least five or six. that I had recommended, which I thought was very nice. And so it can make a huge difference. And I was very quick within a year. The people that if a recruiter is well networked with people, they can often get you into firms that you would not be able to get to on your own because they have credibility with them, they know who they are. And so good recruiters can be just as profound as a really good public relations person. And given the type of work, they will not always represent everyone, but they can definitely, if they believe in you, they can get you a position. And often it's having someone that believes in you that's just as important because that enthusiasm comes through. It comes through when they're talking to law firms on your behalf, when they're writing to law firms, and if they believe you're going to be successful, then you can do very well. And so it's just if I have someone that really wants a position, I do everything I possibly can to get them a job. And a good recruiter can get you a job that you might not be able to get otherwise because of their networks. But again, friends, other people that you know and that know people can help you as well. So it's not to say that a recruiter is your only option, but someone that's networking on your behalf can help you tremendously. I have candidates all the time that I may show when we take questions, I can show you some information about it. But most people, when they're looking for positions, will be applying to a very limited number of places. Maybe they're just applying to jobs. Most of the time, this is what people do. But in most markets, there may be, if you're in any one of the top 25 largest US cities, there's usually going to be multiple places in that market that you could work, regardless of where they have an opening. Meaning, if you're a commercial litigator in Los Angeles, there may be 500 firms that a recruiter could help you get in front of, where you might only apply to 20 or 10 or whatever the number is on your own that have jobs. And those 500 firms, some of them are going to have work that's not getting done. They may not have advertised jobs or whatever it is. And you can get into those if the recruiter has a relationship with those firms or and can get you in. So it's amazing what a good recruiter can do. And applying to a lot of places is very effective for people to do that. But so recruiters are can be very effective. In some markets, they expect you to use it, like New York and things. So they'd be little large firms are suspicious if you're not using a recruiter. But I'm not going to, there's not really much to say about that, but it's different. People do use, a lot of people use agents. If you're a talented actor, you'll use an agent to get a job. Same thing with attorneys. A lot of people do. It can be an important thing. Let me just see here. Okay, and then I'll talk a little bit about this, I think, when we do Q&A, but applying to a lot of different sorts of places is helpful. Recruiters will often know about a lot more employers than you may know about, so that can be very helpful and for you to do too as well. Relocation is also a very good reason to use recruiters and often using a recruiter, they have a much larger network than you do and can be helpful. And there's certain recruiters, by the way, you could call a recruiter and talk to them, and they may know of just have very good relationships with a few places. Sometimes it's not even a lot. It could be it could be a recruiter that's just working at home and but has a few very strong relationships. So those people can help you as well. But a recruiter, again, is no different often than knowing other people that can help you. They can help you too. I like Law Crossing. That's a site that obviously that I started, but what it does is it monitors it's when you look at a site like Indeed or LinkedIn, that you're pretty much seeing only positions that are being paid to post there. But most companies and a substantial percentage of law firms, over 20%, post jobs on their website. So Law Crossing just goes and finds all of those positions. It typically has over 100,000 jobs, and on its site this says 50,000. But that's a good way to find positions that you normally wouldn't, that aren't getting a lot of applications, because jobs on major sites like Indeed and LinkedIn don't get or get a lot of applications because they're being marketed and the law firms and companies and government offices and everything are effectively marketing their jobs and they pay to advertise in those places. But the majority of employers don't. They put things on their website. So Law Crossing finds those. It also finds jobs on different bar association websites and different, what do you call it, different practice area specific websites, local government sites, local practice local bar association sites. So there's tons of jobs you won't find elsewhere. People that use this site often will get multiple positions and interviews using that, where they didn't have the same thing happen when they were using other kind of major sites because there was a lot of competition. So if you're applying to positions where there's not a lot of competition, you're much better off. So if employers put jobs on their website and they don't get applications because not a lot of people come there, people aren't going to go to every 10 person, 20, 30, 40, 50 person, 100 person law firm look for jobs on their website. So we have those and you apply to them. It actually helps you. It's a very good way to get a job, just as applying to different places. And so that can help you. So job boards have a way, and then but that's a way to network, and then but also you can network on different LinkedIn and so forth. So here, the final one I want to just talk to you about real briefly is the importance of networking to keeping a job inside a law firm. And if you can't, and this is to, if you want to stay in a law firm, if you want to have employment stability, in order to survive, I'm going to talk to you about some extremely important things right now about keeping your job. And what I'm going to talk about is another one of these things that if you understand it and you listen to what I'm saying could change the direction of your career. And it's a mistake that a lot of people make. So in order to keep your job within most employment organizations, you need to be effectively networked. And what does that mean? That means that I've watched as a recruiter and as a someone that has worked in law firms, I've realized one fact. And people generally will get fired not because, and they'll lose their jobs, not necessarily because of employment for performance reasons, but they're let go because people don't like them. When someone's fired, it could be that one person doesn't like them, or it could be several, but in general, people that lose their jobs lose it because someone doesn't like them or they're not well networked in a way that's protecting them. So again, people make mistakes inside of law firms, but most of the time when they get fired, it's not for performance reasons. It may be because their hours are too low and so forth, or and that would be an example of maybe not being networked. But most of the time, it's because people don't like them. And if you think about times when you may have lost jobs, and most attorneys have, that it may have been beyond your control, but in most cases, people lose their job because people don't like them. Now, if one person doesn't like you inside a law firm, it's impossible to have everybody like you. Most people will say that there's been studies that you will like one third of the people you meet, you won't care about the other third, and then you may not like the other third. So that's the average. And if you're practicing in any law firm of more than 10 or so people, there's always going to probably be people that aren't always on your side or your fans. But it's expected and it's just part of how things work, like I talked to you about earlier in all organizations. But if one person doesn't necessarily like you, is a superior, they usually can't bring you down for non-substantive reasons if you have strong networks of support. So if one person doesn't like you, they may look for different ways to slight you, both inside and outside of your presence. They may attempt to get other people inside the law firm to dislike you as well. This is what happens if you make enemies with other associates or with other partners in your firm or with partners in your firms. People that don't like you are not on your side. So the only way that can hurt you is if you're not aware of it and not necessarily on the defensive, or if you don't have any defenders who will speak up for you. So if you have defenders that are speaking up for you, then you have people that are supporting you and so it will be very difficult for one person to bring you down. And if you have defenders in the organization, that defender will often make you aware this person doesn't like you to avoid them and will help you. And a lot of times I often hear something that's interesting, that attorneys, that people that I place, they'll say something, I know I'm going to do well here because I'm just working hard and keeping my head down, going home, not getting involved in politics and so forth, like I did where I was before. And I used to think that the person was being smart. And actually, there's a couple things about that kind of statement that if you're not networked, you don't necessarily end up upsetting people as much in your day-to-day interactions, but there's also ways to do network. So you don't want to go too far with your network, but you have to be very careful. You don't want to sleep with people in the office and so forth and say negative things behind people's back, but literally bad stuff can get you in trouble, bringing your personal life too much in. But the network you have in a law firm is extremely important. And if you have a network, you'll know who has the most power. You'll know people to avoid. You'll know how people think about different people you're working with. And you'll be able to know who has work. If you don't have a lot of work, that network will be able to protect you and give you work. That network will protect you from people that may not like you. And all of these things are incredibly useful and can assist you in growing in your law firm. I had something happen very not too long ago. Maybe it was like this time last year. There was a guy that had been a partner in a firm in Phoenix for a long time, like 25 years. And all of a sudden, he took sides on some issue. And because he took sides on that issue, half the firm was very angry with him. He lost his job and was given like, I don't know, 60 days or something to leave after that much time there. And it's just because he had upset a network and he didn't, the network turned against him. And it's just interesting how that works. And so you have to be very careful in any firm to have a network and more people, a lot more people saying positive things about you than negative. And just as I told you earlier, people will not survive inside of law firms and usually will lose their jobs because people don't like them. And if people don't like you and you don't have a network to support you, it's going to hurt you. So this is the final part of the presentation. I just want you to understand, and this is extremely important. Unnetworked legal careers die. The careers may die, or the people behind it working in law firms that are their careers die because they're unable to, or in law firms or in government or wherever they're working or in-house. If you're not networked, you're in trouble. And I could write more about this. I could talk about it much longer, but there's nothing that will kill your career, prevent it from taking off, or limit you more than your inability to network. You may think it's a big deal that you went to a good law school. You may think it's a big deal that you're at a good firm. You may think whatever you think about yourself. But if you're not well networked, you are really, if you don't start now, and anybody can do it any point of their career. I've seen people start networking when they're in their 40s and get and even mid 40s. You can start anytime, but you have to make that an important part of your job. If you're not networking, you're going to really, you're not going to be able to get business. You're not going to be able to get jobs. You're not going to have people protecting you. You're not going all these sorts of things. And you don't have, I just want to be clear about one thing too. So you do not need to be Mr. Outgoing or Miss Outgoing or have the greatest personality. People can network in all sorts of ways. You can network by being like all sorts of ways. And you have to obviously like what you do and you have to be able to talk to people, but you don't have to have the most important thing is just getting out there and being seen and figuring out how to do that and being an advocate for what you do in your practice area. You don't have to be any sort of special person. So while I was in college, I was a great student and in it was University of Chicago, and there were about 10 other students in my class that were also great students because the school kind of called us into this meeting and said that we had the highest grade points and different things, and we should all apply for these Rhodes scholarships and Fulbright scholarships, and none of us got these Rhodes scholarships. I got pretty close with one, but a lot of people that were applying for these scholarships. So there was a couple of people that went to graduate school for different things, but a lot of us applied to law school. And in order to get into law, I don't remember what it was, but you had to wait until March or something until decisions went out. And there was one student in these group of people that had applied for these scholarships and had this incredible grades that was very close to a professor in the University of Chicago Law School, not in the University of Chicago, but in the University of Chicago Law School. She'd been working for him as an assistant or something for the past couple of years. And I remember that she was very enthusiastic about this job. I knew her personally to some extent, and I would see her just almost being very enthusiastic about this guy, just being very nice to him and spending a lot of time with him, chatting and meeting with him personally. There was nothing unusual, sexual or anything going on. It was just that they were friends and close. And he was also very well known in this academic community. He was also the head of this roads for the university and some other things. And at some point, she had told him that she wanted to go to, I believe it was Stanford Law School, which at the time was ranked, I think it's ranked number one now too, but it was the number one law school in and it was her first choice. She told me about this one evening. I don't remember what was going on. And she sent her application in a couple of days before that you could first send your applications. I don't know. So maybe they received the applications first on October 1st. I don't remember what, but something like that. And so she sent her application on a Monday to from Chicago to I don't know, Palo Alto or wherever Stanford is. And within 5 days or so, so she sent it on a Monday, maybe the following Monday, she got an acceptance letter back from Stanford Law School. So the application went out on a Monday and an acceptance letter came back a week later, like 7 days. So they maybe it takes 2 days, 3 days to get there, and then boom, send it back. Just absolutely incredible. Accepted to Stanford Law School the same day they'd received her application, apparently. And most people applying to law school, especially something that may or Stanford, I would have to wait for months. And so, how did that happen? I'm assuming that this partner, the person that she worked for, had this incredible network and was able to make a call and say, "This is someone you should accept." Just Stanford. So Stanford Law School, it's absolutely incredible. And the professor had obviously very well networked, and I doubt that maybe they read our application, but he probably was talking about her for some time. So I saw the same thing a couple years later. So I was in my second year of law school, and I was sitting outside of office of a law professor who became pretty famous. I think he was the dean of another major law school, and I was waiting to speak with him about a paper or something, and then so I was sitting. It was the same thing. He was someone that I remember spending a lot of time chatting with a law student. And I think the law student may have also been his assistant or something or helping him with stuff. And I saw them always talking. And so I looked at this woman. I thought, oh, she's probably like a brown noser and so forth. And I remember thinking that she was wasting her time with this guy. Why was she doing that? Because she spent a lot of time with him. And she was not a great student. She was an okay student. And so I remember on that day I was astonished because I was sitting outside this office and the professor was talking to a law firm. And he said, her grades are okay, but she's going to work very hard. If you make her an offer, I know that I've already talked to these other two firms and they're not going to make her an offer. And I think she belongs with you. And if you make her one, she's going to accept it and she's perfect. And I've been making an exception for grades and everything. This is a big, major US law firm, really good law firm. It wasn't Sullivan Cromwell or something like of that caliber. And I just, at that point, I had no idea that this sort of thing was going on, that professors inside of law schools were overseeing the employment prospects of their people that they liked. And she ended up at this firm. And yeah, I think it was Sullivan Cromwell that she was talking to. It was just incredible. And so all of this sort of thing happens every day. And so there are powerful people around you that can help you. If there are people that are powerful and networked, and it could be professors, it could be all these different sorts of people. And if these students had not taken the time to network like they did, I doubt this girl might have, maybe she would have gone to Stanford or this other girl would have got a job at Sullivan Cromwell. But I think it was all due to how well they networked with one person and it changed their lives. It's amazing. And I've had the same thing happen. With both college and law school, I was able to network with someone that had a very good contacts of those people. So imagine with you, if you are able to network with 10, 20, 50, or 100 people like that, like this girl that got into Stanford or this girl that got into Sullivan and Cromwell. Imagine if you're able to do that. A lot of partners, by the way, will often they'll network and then they'll get this one big client and and then that client will change the whole direction of their career. I was working with this woman once that was senior. She was very senior, and not senior, like a 10th or 11th year associate. And she was being asked to leave a large law firm in Chicago and find another job because she was too senior and they're pushing her out. And all of a sudden, she brought in this huge company. I don't remember what it was. It was a major, like major private equity firm, the largest one in the city at the time, and suddenly had this multi-million dollar book of business that they gave all of some different corporate related, and the whole life changed. It was this, she had millions of dollars, like 5 million plus in business. And this was like a long, and just all of a sudden from one contact, it just happened. But there are partners that will get one of those will hit, but then they have a lot more irons in the fire, or associates. They get many irons, and then they have multiple things like that hitting. They just keep hitting over and over again. And so you network with five powerful people or 10, or like the example I was telling you about with the attorney with $185 million book of business, and maybe the largest in the country. I have no idea, but meeting every person he possibly can that could give work, and knowing that some of those are going to hit. So you can't just develop one relationship. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I have a relationship with this person." That one relationship is not usually going to lead to something. It may, but it usually doesn't. You have to have multiple relationships and lots of them. And I see all these careers. I see them from people from Yale Law School and Harvard and all these great places that just never successfully network. The height of their career is having gone to this great law school, and they never network, and they're always trying to trade in this great school they went to and get into different firms. But people just lose patience after a while because they need people that have work. And then they can't get jobs because they haven't networked successfully with other people in the legal community, or they haven't worked hard and they don't have a reputation as people that are team players as opposed to employees. And Bill Clinton's a very interesting example. So how does someone who grew up with a alcoholic mom, I just gambled at the racetrack, blue collar family, how does someone like that become president of the United States, or an actor become president of the United States? And one of the most interesting things about Bill Clinton, very outgoing, enthusiastic, never practiced law in a law firm. He did go to Yale Law School, but he never forgot almost never forgot a person or a face he met. And what he would do, it's very interesting. He would meet someone, then he would write on an index card everything he learned about the person, and then he would continually refer to that and remember the person, try to stay in contact with them. But even if he only met them briefly 20 or 30 years ago, he would remember everything he talked to them about, their family and their everything. And people would just be freaking amazed. And so everybody he met became a potential referral source. That's how people become successful politicians. It's how people, all these people that are successful attorneys and everything, they're able to effectively network. And that's what you need to do if you want to do and reach your full potential as an attorney. And this is what you need if you want to be general counsel of a big company, or you want to work in a law firm. And so it doesn't necessarily matter where someone went to law school, or if they have big law firm experience. Most people that are successful, maybe they'd be proud of their law school or where they work, but in most cases, it's all of their networking. And people that are well able to network are going to be 99.5% more successful than most attorneys. And the better they network, the better your career is going to be. And you have to you get power, and you get reach and authority, and become famous and become well known and as an attorney or whatever it is you're trying to do, because of your ability to network. And there's all sorts of people that are well networked. And if you are an attorney and you have a well network of people that are referring you business, all of a sudden you have your own business. You have this big business where law firm is working for you. They're giving you associates and office space and a brand and things. And if you don't, and they're going to pay, and if you don't like the way they're supporting you, you can always move to another firm. And there are people that are trying to network with you. You may find that you have law school classmates and other people that are checking in with you to see how you're doing. Just watch what's going on. People that are networked will often be on TV and in the media and things. And just it's just how it works. And there are lots of people, the people that are well networked and attorneys, and they're happier most of the time because they have people that like them, that give them a sense of purpose, that they talk to, that they socialize with, and then people are happier when they're with other people, and people when they have work to do and a sense of purpose, and they're not dependent on one person or one firm or the next job. Their ability to connect with all these different types of people is hugely important, and it could change the entire course of your life. And so if you fail to network within your career, inside of your firm, with people and people that you run into that think highly of you where you're working, if you fail and you don't have the right attitude, if you fail to network outside of your law firm, you're going to have a lot of difficulty. Meaning, if you're not meeting people outs that are not within where you're at that can help you, it's going to be difficult for you. You're going to have a hard time getting business and security. And if you fail, and you're going to fail most of the time, and the people that fail and don't are unhappy, are like having problems staying employed, are the ones that don't network. Now, one of the things I will say, if you're an extremely good networker and you're at a great firm, and that firm, you think you're so good at networking and people like you so much that you could become advanced there and become a partner without networking externally. Sometimes people think that you can do that at some major firms if you're just completely really good. But in most cases, that's not what happened. I meet people that are become partners in major law firms. And I've met people that didn't bring in their own business, but they were very close to someone that had a huge book of business that ended was going to retire and then turn over the work to them. And there's all these different sorts of things that happen when people network. But everybody that's successful in the law firm world is well networked. I know a very successful attorney that he actually started a firm that's doing very well. It's large, but not large, but successful. And he was up for partner at this law firm. And he said that he unfortunately didn't network with someone that had a partner there that had the clout to nominate him and to push him through to be a partner. So you have to do that in law firms. You have to have people nominate you often and then push you through. And then you have to be networked. So enough people there also supporting that decision if you want to do that. And I see partners all the time from major firms with no business. They rose through the ranks because they had hard work and they were dedicated. They developed skills, and so they could become a non-equity partner or whatever it was. And they rose because someone had enough work to support them when they're at the partner level. So someone was able to give them work, and they wouldn't have risen were they not well networked with someone with business. But this is a very dangerous situation to be. And most people that are in this situation, it ends up changing fast. I got one guy right now. He's probably 20 plus years out of school, and he's working at a major law firm, but the work that he was doing for that firm for a long time is now going away. And so he's in trouble. And so he's looking for a position. So it's very dangerous. He's got a family and all this stuff. So if you don't have substantial business, even as a partner, as a non-equity partner, or as an equity partner, you're going to be in trouble. And because the work is going to drive up, it just can't be any other way. A partner needs to be self-sustaining in terms of their work and their survival. And if they don't, if they're just in their office and doing legal work, that's all they're good for. And there's always going to be people that will do legal work for a firm and often cheaper and on a temporary basis where they don't have to pay as much salary and so forth. They can always find people to do work. But the people that bring in work are what law firms need. They don't need people that in the long run that aren't bringing work. A law firm only functions from people that are bringing in work and are well networking. And so unless someone is able to effectively network and has their career and has all these things, people coming to them, then they're almost always going to lose their job. And they do. And if you leave a law firm and you go in-house, if you're not well networked, you can be in trouble and lose your job there and be unemployed. And so most people that are not networked never reach their full capacity, what they could possibly be doing. Networking in a law firm is a smarter career move than in another practice setting, because if you are able to bring in work, you're always going to have multiple ways to people supporting you. And so this is what happens. And I've seen people just have these horrible things, like become partners in AmLaw, 10, 50, 100 law firms, like the largest law firms, and then their income partner, and then all of a sudden the law firm says you don't have any work, you're gonna have to find a job or bring in work in this period of time. Then they're let go. They get divorced many times because it's just that it's hard for them. It's hard for their spouse. I mean, a lot of divorces. And then I've seen partners just very sad stories. People who are very good attorneys and open their own practice that weren't successful. Regardless of people that whether or not they're happy in their job, if you network, you're going to be much better off. And really, your entire success in your career is dependent upon how well you network and staying employed for the long haul isn't possible without effective networking. So you have to be networked to stay employed. If you go in house, you're going to have to be able to get another job after that, and it's very difficult if you're not networked. If you stay in law firms, you're going to have to be well networked inside your own law firm, outside of your law firm, and everything you can possibly do. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. That's just as simple as that, man. It's dangerous and it's scary, but no one teaches networking. You don't learn it in law school. You don't learn it anywhere. And you don't need to be in a law firm. You can have your own practice doing whatever, family law, trust and estates, whatever you want, but you're still going to need to network. And a lot of times people will do those kind of personal injury because it's easier to network. You can advertise, you can do all these things, and you can network your way into business very quickly. You can do it all sorts of different ways. I'm not saying it has to be in a large law firm or a middle market law firm. It could be on your own. It could be doing anything. But the people that have the most clout and network the most are the most effective, have the best careers. And nothing is really, it's the most important thing. It's more important than the quality of your work. It's more important than anything. Your networking abilities should start in law school. Most people don't. They should continue until you retire. People that are interested in networking are always excited to go to different events and different things. They will do whatever they can to network all the time. They will network. I had a job once for a driver to drive me around. It was just ridiculous, but I lived very far from my office in Malibu, and it was like a couple hours to go to Pasadena. So, what was interesting, I remember I had a couple people come out, and I interviewed a lot of people, and I had this couple young people come out, and these guys, and they wanted to be actors, but they were trying to network because they thought if they were driving me around, that might be someone that could get them parts, which I thought was funny. And then I remember I had a really nice house, and Bradley Cooper rented it one time over a Christmas holiday or something. And when he came, when he left two very expensive bottles of champagne and like flowers or something, I remember it was very nice. Just he hadn't stayed there very long, and I was like, wow. It's really nice. And it's just everywhere he went, he was networking. It made him effective. That's what a lot of successful actors do. And so it's very sad that people don't learn networking, and it's extremely important. Most people don't realize it, and if you don't network, you're usually going to be in trouble. And you people aren't going to tell you the importance of networking. It's not in many attorneys, partners, and law firms' best interest to do that because they need people to do the work. But you're not going to succeed unless you have networks, and you're not going to get business unless you have networks. Things aren't going to come to you. I remember I had an asphalt business in what started when I was in high school and in the Detroit area. And when I first started, I thought the most important thing was to just send out all these mailers, put them in these val packs, like these things of all collections of all these different services that would be mailed to houses and things, and then wait for the work to come. And then I thought maybe if I put things in people's mailbox and the work will come. And the work never came. And I got calls and they weren't good. And so the only way I was ever able to bring in work, and I built a good sized business, was by just knocking on doors. I knock on doors of businesses, of people, and introduce myself and network. And so yeah, I wouldn't have had a business to support myself through college and law school had I not learned how to network. It's incredibly important. And one of my friends that made partner at the law firm I was working with, the first firm, he said, no one's ever going to tell you that you don't have to work all the time. You need to make time for yourself. And if you work all the time, you'll never have time to do things you want yourself. And so he's basically saying that people are never, if you're, even if you're working like 100 hours a week, no one's going to tell you to stop because you're making the money. But so you need to have boundaries, and you need to have boundaries to make sure you network because no one's going to tell you. I'm telling you to, but most people are never going to tell you. And if you don't network, then you're never going to go really as far as you can. It's your career's and going to be limited. You're not going to have the success you otherwise would be capable of having by any stretch of the imagination. And what I said earlier is true. The most important thing is being seen. So where are you? Who is seeing you? And in a positive light, but who knows that you're there? Who knows that you're an attorney? Who knows you should be handing out cards if you have them? You should be whatever you possibly can do to be seen in your practice area. So we'll take a quick break, and then when I come back, I will answer questions, and I will answer questions about anything related to today's presentation or any other questions that you have related to your career. It could be about your current situation, your resume, moving, whatever, finding jobs. And yeah, so we'll do that, and I'll be back in just like 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, so let's get to questions. Give me 1 second here. One thing I would say about this particular topic is I think that a lot of times when you hear things, it can be very difficult to listen to certain things because it just shows you something that you may not be doing, and that's difficult to listen to. For me, if I was listening to something like this, I would be, and I was a attorney, I would be very difficult to hear because you realize all this stuff that's important that you may not have been doing because most people aren't doing this stuff. And yeah, it can be these kind of things can be difficult to listen to. It would be difficult for me. I can listen to things all the time that I may not be doing in my job, and I don't like hearing them. It's just I almost want to, yeah. Oh, okay, let me see here. Let me see. Sorry. Let me just, I'm gonna have to, I want to make sure people's names aren't here, which is good. Okay. All right. So, okay, let's see here. Let me get to this. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of these questions. Yeah, okay, so the first question, why do law firms place more trust in candidates who are personally recommended through their attorney network, even at the entry level? If somebody knows you, then the person that knows you is their credibility is on the line. So if they make a recommendation for someone that is likely to create problems or may be there may be issues with that person, then it's going to be difficult for then that person is not going to be as valued as someone that isn't recommended. So people by nature are and groups by nature are very suspicious of outsiders because they think that the outsider there may be something untrustworthy about the person, which many times there is. It used to be that I don't remember what the number is, but people used to live in groups and they never got larger than 60 or 70 or something. This is before farms and that people would be with those groups for their entire lives and they would not trust people from other groups. It was very difficult unless that person knew someone else, or I don't remember exactly how it works. But if someone recommends you, then that person that recommends you, their credibility as a person, for a recommender, is on the line for recommending you. So the law firms, everyone places more trust in people that are personally recommended. I remember I was thinking when I had BCG, when I've been running it for almost 20 years, I realized that almost every single person that I'd ever hired to work here as a recruiter had been someone that had been recommended by someone else that I trusted, which is very interesting. They'd either been recommended by another recruiter that I trusted or someone I knew from somewhere else. And it's very important because then I knew that people that were coming in I could trust with the candidates and data and all that sort of stuff. I think most businesses and law firms are like that too. They typically will hire people that are recommended by others. And so more jobs are gotten through networking and referrals than any other source, more than people applying online, more through recruiters. And the numbers are huge. I don't know what it is, but it's a massive amount compared to that. Yeah, someone said if you come back to last week's answer questions, repeat that. Yeah, if anyone has any questions from last week that I didn't answer, you can certainly answer those. I apologize for that last week. It was over 3 hours I was talking, and I had something. Yeah, let me see here. Okay. All right, so next question. Okay, why does networking often matter more than submitting applications when law students are trying to secure their first full-time legal job? As a law student, it is a lot of a numbers game. So it's certainly if you can network as a law student, it can be helpful to getting a job. But in most cases, you're right. Submitting applications to a lot of different places is important. You should be submitting, and as a law student, I don't know where you're going to law school, but depending on the law school, you should be trying to get apply to jobs in the city that you're from, close places around the law school, wherever that is, and as many places as you possibly can. So a lot of times it is a numbers game, and trying to get applications out to a lot of places is important for law students. Most law students make the mistake of not applying to a lot of smaller places, not applying to enough places, and only applying to employers that are on list of large firms as opposed to trying to get jobs in small firms in different practice areas and really making sure you cover the market. So you need to be applying to a lot of places. Okay, let's see here. Okay, next question. Okay, what networking strategies work best for attorneys looking to move to a new geographic market? So if you are trying to move to a geographic market where you don't necessarily know anybody, that can be difficult without knowing people there. It can be how are you going to network if you don't currently know anybody there? So your options people will do things like they will find people that graduated from the same law school that they did, and then those people they will approach for saying, I want to have an informational interview about what it's like working in the city and or any information you may have. And many times it's very common for those people to take your call and to talk to you, and that can help you networking with people that went to your same law school, trying to, if you are from that city and you grew up there, that can be very effective. But if you're looking to move to a new geographical market, you need to do whatever you can to network, but then you also need to be trying to apply to as many possible employers as you can. Most openings are filled when we place people at BCG. The majority of placements that we make are actually with firms that don't have openings. If you are you say you're an attorney, you're currently practicing, if you are currently practicing, and you can usually find a lot of places wherever you're trying to work that do the kind of work you do, and you should be trying to apply there. And many times just asking for an informational interview about the market and that you're in this practice area and so forth. Then you meet people and going in and spending 20 or 30 minutes asking them questions. And they, of course, realize that you want a job, so they will maybe not have something for you, but they'll have the ability to recommend an employer that you could work for or recommend you to someone. And so that can work very well to do that. So you try to do informational interviews with people who went to your law school or people that may know someone that you know. And if you don't have that, if that doesn't work, then you approach different people in your firm, in firms in your practice area, and ask them for informational interview to learn more about their firm, about the market. It's less threatening when someone's asking for an informational interview for a few minutes of your time. And then it is if someone is asking you for a job. And so those people that you're talking to don't have a job. They're always going to think maybe this person, if they like you, they're going to think maybe I can hire them. But if they don't have a job, then they may know people that they can refer you to. So that's often the smartest thing to do, informational interviews as opposed to just trying to apply for jobs. Okay, let's see. Okay, next question. What are the most common and successful career paths for attorneys after big law? So after big law, if attorneys don't stay there in large law firms, then there's a couple different career paths. The one that's most common, I think, probably and it may be equal, is just going to a smaller law firm. So they can go to a smaller law firm, and often it's easier to develop business there. So that can be very common. So you have a smaller law firm is one. Then the other one is a lot of people will try to go in-house, which you can certainly do. Going in-house can be a good decision or a bad decision. One of the reasons it's often a bad decision is because if you lose your job when you're in-house, it can be very difficult to get another one. And in-house jobs are very risky because you're a cost center, meaning that they're having to pay you a salary without you necessarily generating revenue. You're saving them revenue, but general counsels change that you may be working for, companies merge, they go out of business, like all this stuff happens. New CEOs come in and want their own legal team. New general counsel comes in and wants their own legal team, people that they trust. And so that can make it dangerous for you. So in-house jobs are dangerous, but a lot of times people will go and be very successful doing that and have long-term careers and become fabulously rich. I know people make tens of millions of dollars in stock options and things. So you can do very well at going in-house. So those are some of the main things. And sometimes people go into government. Sometimes people open their own law firms. People do all start. I've seen people just start their own businesses. And I was talking to a woman yesterday that started a yoga studio and just you can do all sorts of things after working in a large law firm. Okay, let's see here. Next question. Okay. How should attorneys evaluate a law firm before lateraling? So how do you evaluate a law firm? It depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes attorneys are looking to move to larger firms with more sophisticated work and with larger clients and better training. It depends on your level. Sometimes people are looking to move to smaller firms where they can work more directly with clients. Sometimes they get more work. Sometimes people are looking to move to law firms it just depends, that are better in their practice area where they can focus more, they can get experience in another practice area that's related to what they do. So those are all sorts of things that you may want to consider when you're lateraling to a new law firm would be those sorts of things. If you want to know like the most important thing that I believe that you should look at, what is the most important thing for any attorney to do when to look at when they're looking at lateral in law firms. The most important thing is access to work and long-term access to work. Because if the work you have as an attorney dies up, then your career dies. And this is what we've been talking about all day with the networking and so forth. We've been saying over and over again that you want to network because you want people to give you work and you want to be able to have work. And so anytime you go to a law firm, your main goal is to be someplace where hopefully you can have long-term access to work. Now, that doesn't mean that that if you go to a large law firm, you believe you're going to stay there forever. Maybe you get good skills and training that will enable you to have long-term access to work. But it's always having access to work is the most important thing. So you have to ask yourself, will this place give me long-term access to work? An interesting point is all over the country on the coast, it's much different, whether it's these law firms, these big law firms and very competitive market, but in most of the country, people will go to a law firm in a middle market, a smaller city or not huge city, could be multiple states in the Midwest or whatever, and they will join a law firm often right out of law school, and they will spend their careers there, and they will have long-term access to work. Certain employment environments are safe compared to others, and so you really want to ask yourself, am I going to get long-term access to work where I'm at? And it can be safer working in smaller firms and smaller markets. It can be safer working in places where there's a lot of work and where they're not going to churn you out. It just depends. But if I was looking for a law firm, I think the most important for young attorneys, so young attorneys, it's often training. And so training, becoming a better attorney, and then you get better training in large law firms because large law firms have larger clients and those clients are willing to pay for a lot of extra work. So that's one of the things that's really good about going to larger law firms. But also when you're young, when you get more senior, am I going to continually get work as I get more senior? Sorry, as I get more senior. So you have to ask yourself that. And then those are some of the kind of the main things that I think are important. But I would say that it is interesting. A lot of times attorneys will go to incredible law schools, they'll go to work at incredible law firms, and they will conclude at some point that, hey, this is very difficult for me to be confident that I'm going to be able to continually have work to do as I get more senior. So I know a very successful attorney friend that went to Harvard Law School and then he worked at Melviny and decided that it wasn't going to work out. He wasn't going to be able to bring in the kind of clients they wanted. So he started his own personal injury firm, became successful. I know another person that went to Stanford Law School and worked at Quinn Emanuel for several years and then concluded he wasn't going to be able to develop the kind of business that they expected. So then he opened a family law firm. I've seen all sorts of people do all sorts of different things to have access to work. So that's, in my opinion, one of the most important things. Okay, next question. I don't know why I like to make these little arrows. It's a nervous habit. Okay, what are the top signs that it's time to leave my in-house legal job for a new opportunity? So typically, it's the same thing that I was talking about here earlier. Anytime it looks like you're going to lose access to work or that there's not going to be work in the future, it could be because the company's merging. It could be because of the company's in trouble. It could be because there's just not enough work or they're downsizing. Anytime you think they're losing work or you're not going to have access to work, that would be a really good sign. Also, maybe you could get a job at a larger company in a more important role, or a smaller company in a more important role, or a job that's likely to have more security. So those are things that I would look at. I think anytime someone's going to work in-house, I think that the most important thing you need to ask yourself is you need to look around that company and say, are there a lot of people that have been here for a long time? So they'll make it look like I could also be here for a long time. Because if they're not, then that's a little scary. The other thing, the mistake that people make too, is a lot of times they will join these startup companies with the idea that if the startup company grows and becomes really successful, they're going to become really successful. But there's different types of people that companies have at different points in time. So if they start hire an attorney when the company is starting, if the company does grow and become successful, they're going to hire a different type of attorney to manage a successful company than they might have when it was a young company. And so people that join startups as attorneys generally don't stay there very long, even though they think that's a smart thing to join a startup. It's just because the sophistication of the work and so forth changes as a company grows. Okay, let's see. Okay. How does partnership track actually work at most law firms? So different law firms have different criteria for making people partner. Different partnership means different things to different firms. So firms will call people a partner, but it's a meaningless title. It is a title, but they're paid not much differently than they would be if you're an associate. They're just given the title. And so you have title only, which could be, I guess you could call income partner, which you can come partner, which could mean one or the other things. You have equity partner, which is a partner that owns part of the firm, and so they get a percent. They usually get a salary raw, and a percentage of firm profits based on a bunch of different things. So those are the two different types of partners. What is a partnership track? So firms will definitely have most firms will have a certain length of time when they will consider you to be a partner. And that could be small firms, it could be 5 years out of school, it could be if you lateral into a firm, it could be 3 years after you lateral, depending on your seniority level. And people are up for partner for different reasons and different times. In large firms, it's very difficult usually to make partner. And so people that don't make partner will leave or know when it's time to leave or be asked to leave in a certain length of time and so it'll work that way. Partnership track. And then sometimes large law firms that maybe take 12 years or 14 years even in some of them firms, and they'll just keep rolling people over for consideration. So each law firm is different in terms of what it is. Most law firms are transparent about it, but the way to really learn about it, if you go to work in a law firm, the way to really learn about it is by seeing what's happened to people there in the past and then asking questions when you get there. And that's usually how you'll figure it out. Every firm is different. Every firm has different criteria for making people partner. Sometimes firms will have all institutional clients where are mainly where it's easier to make people partners. Sometimes it just depends on the practice area, all sorts of different things, but it's generally different everywhere. But the most important point to realize about partnership is firms will only make you partner, usually make you a partner if they have to. So if they have to. And so what does that mean? So that usually means that the value proposition that you're giving the firm is so much greater than it's it, they than keeping you then they if you leave, it's just going to be a huge loss for them in terms of money, in terms of client service, in terms of something. They definitely don't want you to leave because you're providing so much value that that would be something they wouldn't like. So either you have a lot of business, you're an extremely hard worker, you have very good skills, something that no one else has. I had one guy once that was a very talented associate at a good sized law firm, a smaller firm, but he was doing all these trials and things, and it was amazing. And so he was going to leave, and they didn't have anyone else in the entire firm that could do trials, and so they made him a partner because they had to. So they will do that, and then I get people, senior associates and stuff, positions all the time, and then they will give notice, and the firm will be like, "Hey, we don't want to lose this person." And we'll make them partner. That has happened to me several times last year. So again, firms only make people a partner if they have to. So it just depends on the firm. If you have a giant law firm and you think that they need you, the only reason they're going to need you is if you're just providing that you're doing something that would be impossible for them to replicate without you, meaning you have client relationships, you have clients, you have some skill that they couldn't get otherwise. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Okay, the next question. How do I rebuild my legal career after taking a multi-year break from the practice of law? That's a very good question. So people should not be, it's not a good idea to take a break. People do it, of course, all the time, but it's not a good idea because once you do that, you lose access to work and you lose access to the connections and people that were giving you work, and it becomes difficult to rebuild that. I remember when I was starting the practice of law, the first thing I did was a clerkship, and then I took a break from the clerkship. I maybe left the clerkship in June or something, and then my job was starting in 4 months. And I remember there was a guy that I knew, he'd gone to Thomas Cooley Law School. I don't know what it's called anymore, but they taught him there that you should never not be working. Like you always need to keep working and just always working and never stopping work. And so it's almost like the rule is that once an attorney starts practicing, they should always never have stopped working for that long period of time. And I think it because it's much harder. And there's all these professions, like if a airline pilot stops flying for a couple months, they often don't go back. And people that leave the practice of law often, when they go back, they realize that it's just they like not practicing a lot. So then they don't stick with it and things. Anybody can rebuild their career after taking a multi-year practice law, but they have to usually start at smaller firms and places that are willing to take a chance on them, or they can network into certain types of jobs. So they'll have to start at different places that will take a chance on them. And often all that means is finding smaller firms or trying to work in smaller markets or trying to work in firms. They could try to go back to other firms that maybe that they worked or employers again. And someone will always hire you because if they can make money hiring you, then they will. And most attorneys have skills that other people can make money doing. So you need to go someplace and establish and rebuild your skills and either stay where you're at, where you go, or try to move to a better place after that. So anybody can rebuild their career, but the most important thing is that you try to be committed wherever you go next, and you commit and you don't look for reasons not to practice again. And most of the time when people take these long breaks, they take them because they may not have actually enjoyed the practice of law, or sometimes if a woman has children, it's very respected to come back after a break. I saw this one woman, she took a 20 plus year break to have kids and raise them from Davis Polk after being an associate. And then she wanted to go back there and they were like, no problem. This was years ago. I saw that, but I thought it was interesting. But so yeah, anybody can go back to practicing law after taking a break, but often it's going to be difficult at the same level. And it's really not recommended to take a long break. Why would you do it if you are enjoying what you're doing? If you don't enjoy it enough and you want to take a break, then that's a problem. And why wasn't your career a priority back then? And what's going to change now? So those are some of the things. Okay, next question. Okay, what is the most effective way for law students to evaluate whether a practice area will offer long-term job stability and growth? So that's a good question. So different practice areas have different types of long-term job stability and growth. So there are some practice areas that have that more than others. Let me just see if I can bring something up for you and share a screen. I'm just pulling up the BCG database. Give me a second. Okay. So where's the practice areas here? Sorry, I'm on this database all day, every day. I'm just trying to, oh, here we practice areas, primary practice area. Okay, so what sort of practice areas offer the most long-term stability and growth? Sorry, I feel like I'm gonna hair. Anything that is the niche practice area that there's not a lot of jobs necessarily in it, which would be antitrust, art museum, That would be a risky practice area. If you get into a practice area like that, that can be risky. If you go into bankruptcy, that's going to be very dependent on unless you're doing consumer bankruptcy, as often dependent, there's not a lot of jobs. Construction is actually a very good practice area. There are a lot of jobs, so that's a good one. Corporate is a good practice area. You can go into corporate and you can always take those experiences and go in-house and things you learn. But this market also slows down during recessions. You don't know when those are going to hit, but can be very risky. But this is a good practice area for building a book of business. Data privacy is not a good practice area. It was at one time. Education is a good practice area. There's long-term growth. Energy, oil, and gas is okay, but it's dependent on often the oil prices and things, and it can be good or bad. So that can be good. Entertainment is a very risky practice area. The fees and things that attorneys that people charge in that practice area often very low. There's not a lot of repetitive work. It can be very dangerous. Environmental has traditionally been an okay practice area, but it depends on the administration. So obviously, if you have a Republican administration, they're going to be anti-environmental type things. So there's not going to be as much work. And if you have Democrats, the opposite. Land use and zoning, though, is a practice area that is good and has a lot of long-term stability. It's related to environmental, but it's land use. It's different. Family laws, risk and executive compensation is a good practice area. It's a niche where there's not a lot of attorneys, but again, not a lot of jobs. So that can be dangerous. Family law is a great practice area. There's always work. So if you go into that, you're in good shape. Finance is good, but at the same time, it's something you can do in banks and for go in house for, and you can get jobs in law firms doing it, but there's the long-term stability is not great for some people. Food and drug law is risky. What else? Guardianship and conservatorship, that's good. Health, most forms of healthcare are very good because there's always healthcare related work. Immigration's okay, depending on, so if you have an anti-immigration economy like you may have right now, then it's not good. But if you it's the opposite, it's okay. But again, it could be Republican administration, usually bad, Democrat good. Insurance is good. Insurance coverage is always good. Insurance defense, plaintiffs insurance is good. IP is risky. You have IP litigation can go one way or another. Trademark and copyright is absolutely insane. It's very difficult. That's a very risky practice area. And then most forms of patent prosecution, one's doing hard sciences is good, but life sciences is very risky. This is a lot of information for everyone. I don't know that, but someone you asked the question, I'm trying to help you. Labor and employment is usually very good. All forms of labor and employment, a lot of stability there. Litigation, you have multiple types of litigation. Where is this here? Give me a second. Under litigation. There's so many forms of litigation. What I would say is almost every form of litigation is very good. International arbitration is dangerous and not so good because there's not a lot of openings for people to do it. And then all these other forms of litigation are very good, except for white collars, very risky because those jobs are hard to get. There's not a lot of them. But most of these forms, like Supreme Court, is very difficult. But most of these, a lot of stability, any form of litigation, entertainment, probably not. But most of these forms of litigation, if you go to the BCG website, there's a lot of opportunity in them. There's always jobs for litigators all over the country. There's just so most litigators can find positions. So most attorneys are litigators. So that's that. And then municipal law is actually very good. That's a good practice area. Native American law, no, it's not a lot of jobs. Most forms of real estate are okay, but real estate can be dangerous because it's often dependent on interest rates being active, but it's a good practice area. Tax is a very risky practice area. I wouldn't recommend anyone going into it. You can certainly work in accounting firms and things. Employee benefits and executive comp is okay. Controversy is okay if you want to open your own firm doing it. But most forms of tax are very difficult because there's not a lot of jobs in law firms, and tax is a role that supports often M&A and things like that. So people have a hard time keeping stable jobs there. Telecom's very risky. Trust and estates is outstanding. There's a lot of opportunity. And then workers' comp, there's also a lot of opportunity, a lot of jobs there. And that's a lot of information for everyone about practice areas. If you have to remember anything, it's very risky going into certain practice areas that are economically dependent on certain events happening, which would be I guess I talked about, what did I talk about with that? Certain maritime, again, was a risky one. Native things where there's not a lot of jobs are often very dangerous, but things where there are a lot of jobs, where there's a lot of opportunity, are very good. So trust in estates and family law are both excellent. Personal injury is excellent because there's always people getting injured. But a lot of these other practice areas can be very difficult. Most forms of corporate are good because there's always going to be corporate related work, but when you can get jobs in house and things doing that. So that gives you, I hope, a little bit of understanding of under that. But the more potential clients you have, the better. And most forms of litigation are good because once you learn how to be a litigator and a large law firm, you can do most forms of litigation. I think if I was an attorney, some of the one thing practice areas that I think are really excellent too are like labor and employment is awesome. There's always jobs doing that. Trust in the states is awesome. There's always clients for that. Some of these practice areas are great. There was a just for trust in estates, I just want to tell you like an interesting thing. I was looking at some office space in Malibu a couple of years ago, and there was this, it was in the old Malibu courthouse, which is from, I don't know, 100 years ago or maybe more. And there was one attorney that had the actual courthouse was his office, the old courthouse. And I was like, who is this? And because it's beautiful like space, and the owner of the building was like, this is incredible. This guy graduated from Loyola Law School, I don't know, 4 years ago or something, or 5 years ago. He started a trust and estates practice. He never worked for a law firm. And he just bought a $5 million house in Malibu. I was like, wow, it's crazy. It's just from that practice here. I mean, it's a lot, I don't know how he did it, but there's definitely a lot of opportunity in different practice areas. Okay, next question. How do legal recruiters actually work and who pays them? Legal recruiters are paid by the employers, and so employers will pay essentially a fee equivalent to some percentage of the candidate's salary for a year. They pay them a percentage of it. It could be anywhere. It just depends. It could be just different percentages, 10%, 20%, just it depends. So that's how they get paid. Law firms pay them. So if you go to work in a law firm and you make $200,000 a year, just hypothetically, you're probably going to be generating 600,000, 800,000 for the firm per year. So if the firm pays you 10% of that 20,000, it's maybe, I don't know, weeks worth of your work or something, and they make money. So law firms use recruiters to help to make money. So when a law firm, most law firms hire with recruiters because the recruiters are finding them people that are good, that are screened, they pay attention, they know that the person can come in and make the money very quickly. So that's how most legal recruiters work. Okay, let's see. Question. But what legal recruiters do is legal recruiters will get jobs from employers and go out and recruit people for them. Sometimes they'll have open-ended arrangements with a law firm to find certain types of people if they come along. They will present people to law firms as a business proposition. Their job is to get you out there and try to create interviews and opportunities for you that you might not normally get on your own. And that's how they work, but they are all paid by employers. Okay, how can I use networking to get law firm interviews when I'm not getting responses through online applications? Yeah, so online applications are difficult many times to get interviews for because you're competing with everyone else that's applying. And oftentimes, law firms and employers will actually post jobs when they already know who they're going to hire, but they just want to make sure that they advertise it for whatever reason. So someone is network. So how do you network? Typically, you would have a network before you're applying to jobs. You would be having networks with people you went to school with. You would have networks of other people, and you would have people that could be helping you. But if you're not getting law firm interviews with just online applications, your goal really should always be to develop a long-term network that can help you. You can contact people at different places you again, like you went to school with. If people, you should always be the biggest thing I can tell you to do, networking for the future, is I said it earlier, but I'll just say it again, is write down a list of maybe 100 people, everybody that you know, and then try to get in touch with them somehow. When you get in touch with them, you contact them, you message them, ask them how they're doing, check in on them, whatever it is. Never ask for a job or tell them that you need work or you're trying to get business, and you just stay in contact with people. And then the more you stay in contact with people, you ask them about themselves, people will ask you about what you're doing. And if they learn that you're looking for something and that sort of thing, they may help you. But those are some of the things that I would recommend. Often, if you're not getting interviews, you can sometimes contact people at the places where you'd like to work and and maybe try to get their attention somehow. Just say, hey, I applied for this job. I'd really love to do it. I think I'm a good fit. But the biggest piece of advice, the final piece of advice I will give you is when you're applying to jobs. So this is a kind of an example that I'll just show you from BCG and what we do, and which I think is well is interesting. So let's see here. So this is something that we do at BCG that you can do yourself. It doesn't mean that we're doing anything special, but we are doing something special. But there's over 100,000 law firms in the country, and it's a huge number. I'm talking about law firms of 10 or more people. There's just all these different places you can work. So if you're applying to just places on job boards, your coverage is traditionally going to be maybe 1 to 3% of the jobs in the market because things are being filled informally, all sorts of different ways. LinkedIn, same thing, maybe 1 to 2%. Most recruiting firms and recruiters can be way less than 1%. And then BCG, we can't, 85 is probably a little bit optimistic, but if you want to, it's much higher than 50 or 60 or 70, but 85 may be right. But you're covering the whole market. And all that means is just knowing all the firms in your practice area in the market and being able to cover those and apply to those firms. So the most important thing to understand is law firms are businesses. And if you're working 2,000 hours a year and a law firm's paying you 260,000, that you may be generating 740,000. So anytime you apply to a firm without openings, that firm, if they can make money off you and they have the work, will bring you in and interview you, even if they haven't gotten around to posting jobs or having a recruiter or something working on it. It can make a major difference. One of the most effective ways and things that we do is go and we research all the firms, and we have the research in BCG, all the firms in different markets that do different types of work. And then once we have that, then we approach those firms on behalf of our candidates, and that enables them to get many more jobs than they would get if they were applying on job boards, LinkedIn, or the recruiters. So you don't need to use BCG to do this. You can go in and research all the firms in your market that do the kind of work that you do and apply to them, and they don't have to have openings. And you can develop major list of places, huge list of potential employers doing that in different markets and places you could work in your state and your city. It's just all over. So that's what I would recommend. That's the most effective way to network, is to be applying to places that don't necessarily have openings. Very effective. Yeah, let me just hear, make sure. Where was I? Okay. Yeah, so that would be my advice. Then that's the most effective networking. By applying to firms that don't necessarily have openings, you're opening yourself up to a lot more places. Let's see here. Okay, let me just give a second. Most of the second. Okay, next question. How can I avoid legal industry credibility if I didn't attend top law school? So it doesn't matter where you went to law school. Anybody I mentioned earlier, Pam Bondi, who's Attorney General of the country, she went to Stetson Law School in Florida, which obviously isn't a top 10, isn't a top law school. So anybody can develop legal industry credibility. You can develop it in your practice area by doing networking, becoming an expert, by writing papers, by being on commit, whatever it is. You can do it in your practice area. You can do it in your geographic location. You can do it in your practice setting, could be the government, it could be the in-house. And you can network and get a reputation as doing good work. So the law school you go to doesn't matter. It's what you do with people and your practice area and your skills and how you continually improve. So you're always going to have credibility. People mistakenly think that the law school they went to is the most important thing. But in reality, the most important thing is your passion, your energy, your ability to network, and all those sorts of things can make you much more successful in the long run. Let's see your questions. Give me 1 second. So I'm just reviewing all these questions. Okay, so the next question is, what is better, networking with attorneys or, I'm sorry, give me some, what's better, networking with attorneys or business, so I can't copy these. I'm having an issue with that. Attorneys or business people in general, could you specify for international arbitration? Can you specify international arbitration? Okay, so it's important for people to network both with attorneys and with other people. If you network with attorneys, that can help you with jobs, it can help you with referrals, a business, it can help you with all sorts of things. And so it is important to network with attorneys. So attorneys can be sources of business or jobs, and business people can also be sources of business and even jobs. So it doesn't, both of them are important. They're equally important, and they should be different types of networking that you're doing and long-term networking, not just short-term with business people. You network with business and all sorts of things. So there's that. So international arbitration is what you asked about. I think international arbitration, I don't know if you're a foreign attorney or what it is. For me, that's a very scary practice area because it can be very difficult for attorneys to stay because there's not a lot of jobs. And that's the biggest issue. And there's not a lot of cities where there are international arbitration. You have Texas, Miami, New York, lesser Washington, D.C., but there's not a lot of jobs. And it's often very difficult for people to bring in clients. So if you want to do international arbitration, most of the work is at big firms, but there are smaller ones. You would have to be very good at networking either in your home country with people to try to get work or with attorneys that necessarily don't have that practice. But international arbitration is a tough one. That's a practice area that a lot of people want to go in, especially from foreign countries. I think it's a very difficult practice area for people to stay employed in the long term. I remember once there was a international arbitration attorney that I worked with, and he ended up getting a job in Saudi Arabia that lasted for a couple of years. But he went to University of Chicago Law School. He'd worked at a really good firm. I don't remember what it was in Washington, D.C. for 10 or 12 years. Then they let him go when he got senior, which happens. And he had been unemployed working as a bartender for like 3 or 4 years when I came across him. And this guy that went to University of Chicago Law School and worked in a major international law firm. And then he tried to go to medical school, but no one would hire him because it was like a second choice. No one would let him in, even though he did really well. But I just think international, because he obviously hadn't wanted to be a doctor to begin with. So I think international arbitration is a difficult one. And I think it's of all practice areas, I think that it's one of the most difficult to stay employed for the long term because there's just not a lot of lateral opportunities in international arbitration. Whereas if you became a just a regular litigator, there's always going to be opportunities. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to answer this person's question. I can't copy this particular screen. Unfortunately, this person says, I recently moved to the US and I'm a licensed attorney in my home country, though I'm not licensed here. As an international legal professional, I'm curious about the best way to introduce myself when we don't share common touch points like law school. How can I position my background and transferable skills as an asset differentiator in the US market? So people that come over from other countries to work in the United States, there's all sorts of issues with being successful doing that. But there's a couple things you should be doing to position yourself correctly. The first is you probably, if it takes 3 years, but the smartest thing you can possibly do is to get a US JD. Nothing makes it easier for you to get hired in the US than getting a US JD because you are getting into a law school that's as competitive as you can get into. Then you're competing with other new attorneys to rank at the top of your class, to do well, to get jobs in the summer, and then to get them, and then you can be competed compared to all those different JD attorneys, as opposed to getting an LLM when all you're doing is basically paying for a 1 year degree that where there's great inflation and it just doesn't, it's not meaningless, but it doesn't mean a lot. But you need to pass the bar exam. Most people can take the California, New York bar exam from foreign countries. You need to pass the bar exam. And after you pass the bar exam, people have to look at you and think that they can hire you without having to do all sorts of visa sponsorships and that sort of thing. So you need to organize that. Do you have a green card? What's going on with that? So all these things are important to work in the US. It's very difficult. Most people that try to get jobs in the US from foreign countries as attorneys do not succeed, but they don't succeed not because they can't get jobs. They succeed because what they do is they only try to work in the large law firms in large cities where your best odds are going to be trying to get jobs in smaller law firms or outside of major markets. So New York is a huge state, for example. There's hundreds of cities and places that have attorneys working in them, and you would want to try to get jobs either in those places and not just large cities like New York, if you could, and apply to different places. That's what I would do. Everybody is hireable. People will hire you if they feel like they can make money. But again, I don't know what kind of legal system you were trained in. You are going to need the bar exam. No one's going to hire you without that. You're going to need the ability to be hired in the US. But the smartest thing any international attorney can do is to get a JD, because without a JD, it's you can't you can't be compared to other, you don't share the same education. And a JD is often just to judge the quality of law school you're at and then how well you do with your peers compared to other people. And then law firms can understand your motivation, your skills, all sorts of things based on that. Okay, how to network broadly if your professional work straddles two fields in this polarized political climate. Example, your firm has big pharma clients and increased visibility might reveal your health equity activism background. So there's nothing wrong with taking sides on any political issue. Attorneys that are successful are often very obviously Democratic or obviously Democratic Republican, and they have strong opinions about different matters. And clients are attracted to people that have strong opinions about different things. And that's okay. You don't have to hide your interest in something. People like people that support what they're interested in or they're on their side of different matters, and clients like that. And you're much better. Usually, even if you have an opinion about something that only 10% of the world or the country has, if you have that opinion and there's clients out there that have that, they're going to be more comfortable with you. People identify with people that are similar with them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with you have your two fields where things might be politicized. I don't think you have to worry about that. I think it's perfectly fine I'm sorry, to take a side on a matter, and you don't have to necessarily cover it up, or you should be working for the types of clients and the types of people that match your interest many times. So you don't have to, and many attorneys will not make their politics or their opinions known and to different types of clients to get different types of clients. But I don't think there's anything wrong with someone just being flat out, hey, I'm a diehard Democrat or Democratic Socialist or Republican, whatever it is. You can be the person you want to be, and clients will be attracted to that. They're more likely to be, you actually are probably better off if you come out and say, hey, I'm a far right Republican, because businesses that are far right will be interested in you as opposed to if you're just this kind of bland person without any politics, where different businesses have no reason to be attracted to you, unless you have a certain types of politics. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Next question. I meet a lot of people who want to stay in touch and often find myself overwhelmed. Any recommendations for managing many connections? I've also run into the problem of people mistaking my enthusiasm for the work as romantic interest. Any tips for ensuring the contacts remain professional? Okay, that's actually an interesting question. I don't want to get in trouble answering it. But yeah, so a couple things. So Yeah, people can get overwhelmed by people that want to stay in touch, and that's actually not a bad thing, but you should be selective about who you put too much attention with. So, meaning someone that potentially could help you versus someone who's just taking up your time. So, you need to protect your time and you need to be careful about that. But networking is extremely important, and you have to make sure that you are doing that and hopefully with the right people and not wasting your time on people that are not gonna or never lead to anything. Everyone can potentially lead to something, but you need to be careful about that. To people trying to stay in touch, you need to be responsive. You need to do the best you can. People that are very good networkers, they'll often spend, there's certain people. I was reading a story the other day about a God's an exceptional networker that starts writing Christmas cards in July, writes these personalized Christmas cards to all these different people, and starts doing because it's all this work and it takes him all this time. He starts doing it in July. It's a form of network. It's important. And then people mistaking your enthusiasm for the work as romantic interests. So those obviously are people that you may not want to be involved with. So you have to be very careful with that. And it's definitely a good point. I have a friend, it's not a great story, but he was dating this woman in Washington, D.C., and she's a very successful lobbyist and also very attractive. And so she was flying to Ukraine or something for something and invited him to come and then said, I'm also bringing my client and I want you to pretend you're my lawyer. He was this client that he was a lobbyist for, or she was a lobbyist for some group that he was selling weapons to or something in Ukraine. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something like that. And she said to him, I want you to pretend like you're just like my lawyer and don't touch me or anything because, and again, I'm telling you what this person did. I'm not suggesting it's right because I want him to think that I'm available even though I'm not because it's helpful for me getting work for him, which I thought was just absolutely crazy. So people approach this in different, and my friend, of course, was very upset about that. People approach these things in different ways, and so if someone does think you have to obviously I'm not a woman or so I don't but I would say the smartest thing to do is to try to be professional. I've had instances where I'm working with people on different things, whether I'm hiring them or thinking about hiring them or whatever it is, or have hired them where there's like some mutual interest, but I try to make sure that I don't make anything obvious. Like I'm not, because if I cross that line, then that says something negative about me, and that person won't want anything to do with me. So you have to, anybody that's crossing that line is probably, if they're going a little bit too obvious about it, you need to probably either back off and not having to do with them or just be very clear with them. Because yeah, that's a good question. But it's something that I've seen what you're talking about quite a bit, and it's definitely a thing. Okay, I think those are about all the questions. I appreciate everyone being on the webinar today. And again, I apologize I didn't get everyone's questions last week. And yeah, I think, like I said, I think this is an extremely important webinar in terms of the what we covered and how important it is for everyone's career and your long-term success as an attorney, because everything about this particular presentation and networking literally will determine the course of your life and what happens to you in your career. And if you're not good at it and you don't do it and effectively, then you're never going to reach your full potential and what you're capable of. And the entire profession, the most successful people are very good at this, and the ones that aren't have the most long-term issues. So thanks everyone, and I will be back with next week. Thanks.